All right, we're good to go. You can start the recording, Paul. Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is the South Coast AQMD Hearing Board. Today on calendar, we have Amoresco Chiquita Energy LLC, case number 6143-2, which was taken off calendar. And then we have on consent, LADWP case number 1263-80 for a regular variance regarding rules 203, 2004, and 3002. And then after that, we have South Coast AQMD versus Amoresco Chiquita Energy LLC, case number 6143-4. And this is for an order for abatement. So let's go ahead and start with the item number 2, the consent calendar for DWP. And we have some exhibits to mark. The joint stipulation to place the matter on consent.
Excuse me, Madam.
Yes.
Just no disrespect, but we have that rule that we have to take the consent items after
Okay.
the regular.
All right. So whoever is writing up the agenda needs to know that.
Always the same way, consent calendar is always listed first, whether you take it first or not.
Okay, so we're going to take it after. All right. Okay, no problem. All right, so let's go ahead and put that one aside and go straight to DWP, of which we also have, okay, so that we're not going to have that document. We do have the declaration of Ian Guthrie.
It's Chiquita will be another opinion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm still looking at DWP. Okay, here we go. And that is number 4 and not number 2.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if we're doing the scheduled hearing, we are gonna set aside those documents.
All of them, including the,
We'll address those
Findings
when
and
we have that hearing, but South Coast AQMD versus Amoresco, we don't have documents for them because they haven't appeared yet. So,
okay.
we're ready for them to appear.
All right, so including the findings and decisions, is that right?
The LADWP case, we're not handling right now.
So
I
there
know,
should
I'm
be
looking at
findings
Amoresco.
yeah, there
Okay.
should be findings and decisions, a stipulation and one declaration, and then 2 additional exhibits, all in the South Coast AQMD versus Amoresco case.
Okay, so on these findings and decisions that we received, I have that as number 1.
Okay, if you want to do that one as number 1, make
I think
sure.
it should be A, because they were submitted by the respondent.
Thank you. Although I have you at the top, Catherine, on this one. Yes, so we're not doing the declaration.
Hold on.
And then I have 2 copies of the findings and decisions. Was there a reason we had 2 copies?
No, there should be 3 documents total. One of them is a stipulation that was to put on consent. One of them is the proposed stipulated findings. And then one of them is a declaration from the respondent's witness.
Okay, Ian Guthrie, right?
No, I
I'm
believe.
sorry, that's still DWP.
Andrew McClelland is respondent's witness.
Oh, that one I don't have. I do not have Andrew McClelland. That declaration.
Here's a copy. Does any of the other board members need copies of the,
Thank you.
and hard copy?
No,
You want it?
All right, so let's go back to marking them again. Okay, so we still are looking at Then I'm going to mark the declaration, which is coming from the respondent. Okay, so that's going to be A. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Just a second, let me grab my paper. Everything's out of order now. Okay, yes, if you're marking the declaration as the first item
Yes,
for
A.
respondent, it will be A. That'll be the declaration, okay?
Okay. And then the, let's see. All right. I have, okay, so let's see, no, that's gonna be for the findings and decisions then. I have it coming from the district, but you're saying it's
They were
coming from.
submitted by the respondent. It's a stipulation, so both parties signed off on them, but it is submitted by the respondent's counsel.
Okay. All right, so since they're the respondent, then we would mark that as B as in boy. Correct, Madam Clerk?
That would be next in line, yes.
Okay. All right, and do we have anything from the district?
So there should be one more from the respondent. That would be the stipulation to put the matter on consent. That I think should be C.
Okay,
And then following that, yes, there are exhibits from the district.
okay, the stipulation is C. All right, and you're saying we have exhibits from the district?
Yes, there should be two exhibits. First, there's a process flow diagram for Amoresco. I would submit that as exhibit 1 if the chair is amenable. And then there's secondly a graph showing total reduced sulfur, or TRS and DMS.
That'll be number 2.
That would be 2. One last procedural item. There was prior correspondence from the vice chair and a response from the district. I would also
Okay,
suggest
so
that should be admitted as part of the record.
hearing board document 1.
Okay,
Yeah,
2 of them?
Well,
there was a set of questions as well from Mr. Balagoplan. There was not a formal response of answers to those questions yet.
Okay, so we can mark that number 2 then. All right.
can we,
I'm sorry, that would be number 3. I'm
we-
sorry, hearing board, it would be hearing board 1,
Hearing board and
hearing board 2.
can we get a copy of hearing board 1?
okay. Those are your questions?
No, Mr. Pearman's questions and
There was a question from the vice chair and a response from the district.
Okay, okay.
Of
So,
which I don't have those at all.
okay, let me. Let's see what this is. There, okay.
I'm missing anything.
Okay, well, I'll make copies.
If it's easier, I mean, it's somewhat duplicative of one of Mr. Balagopoulan's questions, so I'm happy we could just, if that's the preference, is to omit it and we can just address it in the hearing at the board's preference.
I want to mark them just to make sure that we have all documents to consider. So she's getting those. So we're just waiting for those emails. Yeah, let's go off the record for 5 minutes.
That's gonna be exhibit HB. B2.
This is HB1.
HB1.
The copy is inclusive of all of the questions.
And that's just HB1. I'm sorry, HB2, which is only Mr. Pearman's question and the response. So do you need a copy of HB1 now?
Yeah, because it wasn't responded to, so.
Yeah, okay.
He's here.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right. Okay.
so that will be. Let's make it, okay, so we'll have that at the end.
Okay.
Let's see. Who's here on behalf?
You need to turn your mic on.
Who is here on behalf of the district?
Good morning, Madam Chair, Catherine Roberts, on behalf of the Executive Officer.
Are we off the record or on the record?
No,
Madam?
I'm sorry, Paul, we're back on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have Dr. Abraham.
Correct,
Correct.
I'm here.
Okay, great. All right, and who is here on behalf of Amoresco?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Aaron Potash of Latham and Watkins on behalf of Amoresco.
Thank you. All right. And we've marked the exhibits, and will you be having a witness today?
Yes, Andrew McClelland of Amoresco is present.
And
Yes, the district will call an engineering witness, but the district also has available a compliance witness if the board has additional questions.
okay. So all those who are going to be testifying this morning, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will be telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, thank you. All right, so we can go ahead and start with opening statements. Ms. Roberts?
Thank you, and good morning, board members. The district's matter for today is a stipulated order for abatement. The underlying facts leading to the cause of this violation are actually fairly familiar to this hearing board because this board actually decided and heard a variance in a closely related factual scenario in case 6143-2. As a procedural matter, the parties have stipulated that all of the findings, evidence from that variance proceeding should be incorporated by reference into this hearing to avoid us having to re-go through all of those facts.
So moved.
Thank you. The district's presentation today will focus on trying to answer some of the questions that came from the hearing board. We do believe this is a fairly straightforward stipulation of an order for abatement. It is necessary to move this facility from a variance to an abatement order, mostly for legal reasons, because their variance has gone on for longer than a year. So the abatement order looks fairly similar to what was approved under the variance condition. I do want to address, two board members had questions of one of the glaring omissions, it seems, is payment of excess emission fees. Those are not present in the abatement order, but they were a core part of the variance. Excess emission fees come under Rule 303D1, and they are paid for every variance, but that provision of the rule does not apply to orders for abatement. But crucially, unlike a variance, which grants full relief from violations, an abatement order does not. That means the facility will be liable for civil penalties for every violation and every day of violation. The district does take civil penalties seriously, but civil penalties are not within the jurisdiction of the hearing board, so they are not included in the abatement order. For members of the public, I do want to note that there is a public forum for civil penalties. Monthly, the General Counsel reports civil penalties to both the Stationary Source Committee and to the Governing Board. Both of those reports are public documents. And those committees and the governing board both take public comment. So there is a public forum. It's just not this one, unfortunately, in terms of civil penalties. So we think that addresses the questions. We appreciate, particularly Board Member Balagopalan gave us a set of detailed questions that we hope to answer in testimony today. And we think with that understanding, the board should adopt, as stipulated, the proposed order for abatement. Thank you.
Thank you. And for Mamoresco?
Good morning again, Madam Chair and members of the hearing board. And I know you all have heard this before, and as District Council just stated, the facts of this matter should be very familiar. But let me just briefly recap that Amoresco is a renewable energy facility. What they do is they take landfill gas from the Chiquita Canyon landfill, and they use that landfill gas to generate electricity. Amoresco does not own the landfill. The landfill is owned by a different party who you've heard from in other matters, including an order for abatement hearing last month. You'll hear testimony today briefly to recap the facts that you've already heard in past hearings related to this matter, that using the landfill gas from Chiquita Canyon, Amoresco produces enough electricity to power 10,000 homes. If Amoresco didn't use this landfill gas, it would otherwise go to waste. By using the landfill gas, Amoresco adds 9 megawatts of renewable electricity to the grid in Southern California. This renewable electricity likely displaces fossil generation, such as natural gas generation, and the associated emissions that would occur from that fossil generation if Amoresco were not powering 10,000 homes using landfill gas that would otherwise go to waste. It would simply be flared by the landfill and put to no beneficial use. Early last year, as you'll recall, Amoresco detected elevated sulfur concentrations in the landfill gas that it was receiving. Amoresco informed the landfill, and Amoresco, as well as the landfill, separately petitioned the hearing board for variance coverage. Interim variances were granted, followed by regular variances last May, and to this day, Amoresco continues to operate under variance coverage, but Amoresco's variance expires today. Unfortunately, as you know, the elevated sulfur situation in the landfill gas, the reaction in the landfill is ongoing, and as a result, the landfill gas that Amoresco receives contains elevated sulfur, and Amoresco cannot operate in compliance with the sulfur limits in its permit or the Rule 431.1 requirements that the permit requirements mirror. In December, Amoresco petitioned the hearing board requesting that the variance be extended. As District Council just stated, the district took the position that the variance cannot be extended, and instead, because the situation at the landfill, the elevated sulfur concentrations are outside of Amoresco's control, and it would be challenging to develop increments of progress under a variance, Amoresco and the district began discussing a stipulated order for abatement. And over the past several weeks and months, we've worked closely with District Council and district staff to put together stipulated order for abatement conditions, which are before you today, marked as Respondents Exhibit B, a draft findings and order, which was submitted via the consent calendar. We're grateful to the district for their time and willingness to engage in robust dialogue in discussing the situation at the facility and the conditions that the district believes would be necessary for continued operation by Amoresco to ensure protection of the environment and public health, while allowing the facility to continue to operate and generate renewable electricity for 10,000 homes. The order for abatement conditions that you find before you on Respondents Exhibit B impose stringent H2S treatment requirements. They would require that Amoresco route landfill gas to an H2S scrubber system as feasible. And this gas that would be routed to the scrubber system has already been treated by the landfill's H2S scrubber system. So when it's combusted at Amoresco's facility, Amoresco's combusting gas that has an even lower H2S concentration than if the gas were to be combusted by the landfill. Amoresco also faces a requirement under the conditions that were submitted to the hearing board to conduct daily analytical testing for the landfill gas to determine sulfur concentration. And Amoresco has agreed to new conditions on its operation of the landfill gas treatment system, including with respect to temperature monitoring, and that's in order to address a concern that was specifically raised by district staff. If the hearing board were to not issue the order for abatement as stipulated by the parties and presented to the hearing board, and if the hearing board were to instead seek to impose more onerous conditions under the order for abatement, Amoresco faces a real risk of being forced to shut down its facility to avoid noncompliance with the order for abatement terms. And while it would be true that there would be no excess sulfur emissions from Amoresco's facility if it were shut down, we strongly believe, and you'll hear testimony today, that it would be a net negative for the people of the South Coast and for the environment. Because what would happen is the landfill gas that Amoresco is currently combusting would instead be flared by the landfill, and there would be no electricity that would be produced with that gas. Instead of that gas being beneficially reused, it would be flared as a waste, and 9,000 homes that currently benefit from renewable electricity would get none. There would be a natural gas plant in all likelihood, or another fossil source that would be creating its own emissions, providing power to those homes. So we respectfully request that the hearing board grant the order for abatement as stipulated by the parties. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Ms. Roberts, did you want to present your first witness?
Yes, Madam Chair, the district will call Beitong Chen. Good morning, Mr. Chen. Could you state and spell your name for the record, please?
BAITONGCHEN.
Thank you. And could you confirm that you took the oath today?
Yes.
Could you tell us what is your title again with the district?
Air quality engineer.
And are you familiar with the Amoresco Chiquita Energy Facility?
Yes.
And you're familiar with their prior variance in case number 6143-2 as well, is that correct?
Yes.
I want to ask you, are you also familiar with a related facility, Chiquita Canyon Landfill?
Yes.
So I'm going to direct and kind of start walking you through some of the questions that we had from the hearing board. To kind of help with that, I'm going to pull up what has been marked as District Exhibit 1. This is a process flow diagram from Amoresco Chiquita Canyon. Is it generally true, just to kind of orient us, that the Amoresco receives gas from the landfill, puts it through the processing of cleaning the gas, and then some of that gas goes to turbines and some of it is then flared? Is that generally a fair summation?
That's correct.
Okay. So is it your understanding that since the last time we've heard from Amoresco, which was May of 2023, there have been updates at Chiquita Canyon Landfill as to their ability to flare some of their gas, including by installation of a new flare?
Yes. I think they installed their Flare 3 last November.
So in general, to the extent that we understand, could you explain what is the impact on Amoresco of having a third flare at Chiquita Canyon Landfill?
If we're talking about flow rate wise, based on the recent data we received since November, there was no impact observed to the flow rate to Amoresco.
Okay, so to the best of your knowledge, is it still a true statement that that Amoresco is likely necessary in order to handle all of the gas currently being produced at Chiquita Canyon landfill?
I believe Amoresco is helpful because one of the odor causing is caused by the fugitive emissions from the landfill surface. So if both facility can pull enough landfill gas from the landfill, they can avoid the fugitive emissions from the landfill surface.
Okay, is it also true that based on the current situation at Chiquita Canyon landfill, we maybe can't say for absolute certainty the full amount of capacity needed for handling all of the gas currently at Chiquita Canyon landfill?
Do you mind repeat your question again?
Sure. Is it fair to say that we don't know for certain? We can't give a 100% certain answer that we know how much gas Chiquita Canyon like capacity for flaring or turbines they actually need right now.
That's correct. Yeah, the statement is accurate.
Okay. So I do want to address the second part of that question. Are you aware that Chiquita Canyon landfill has plans to install another flare, presumably let's call it flare number 4?
They have submitted the application for flare number 4. Yes.
In your opinion, based on as a permit engineer, is that a short-term concern that there's likely to be flare number 4 that's going to come up and running in the next month or so?
Because this is a Title V facility, so the permit processing is complicated. There are many things we have to put in consider, such as CEQA as well as EPA review. So it might take longer than a month. Yeah.
Okay, so is it fair to say that maybe the future flare is more of a longer term plan, but not an immediate plan?
That's correct.
Okay. So I want to call your attention to this graph, and there's a couple of points they're in red on this chart that I'm hoping you can point out and explain to us. Can you tell me what is FLT 206?
So that's a sampling port. Basically, that's when the landfill gas arrives at the Amoresco from Chiquita. That's the first sampling port for Amoresco. Yeah.
And is there another sampling port at FLT 321?
Right, that's right before the 2 turbines.
So is it fair to say that under their variance, in order to understand how many excess emissions, they were sampling first at FLT 206 and then second at FLT 321 and then subtracting those two? Subtracting that value to get the difference?
Yes, to get a difference for
calculating excess sulfur?
actually no, because the sampling at FLT 321 is what's the sulfur concentration going to the turbine, and the excessive sulfur emission is based on their permit limit. So
Okay, sorry. So what is the difference then between what we would measure at FLT 321 and FLT 206?
That's the estimation for how much is removed, sulfur compound removed by the vessel. But as you can see on the graph, there is a bypass line there.
Okay. So I want to pull up this second exhibit the district submitted to kind of help us walk through understanding what their emissions have been. So first of all, to just kind of orient us, we're talking about the amount of sulfur at that location FLT 206 from the prior chart. Is that right?
That's correct.
And when this chart is labeling as TRS or the blue dots, that refers to total sulfur. Is that correct?
Yes,
And DMS refers to dimethyl sulfide. Is that correct?
yes,
So DMS is actually a subset of TRS. Is that correct?
yes.
Okay, so can you kind of walk us through the question from the board member was, have the DMS concentration levels before combustion, either in the flare or turbines, increased since the last hearing, which was May of 2023?
The short answer is yes, but as you can see, the concentration within the landfill varies a lot, but the general trend it is going up.
Okay, so is it fair to say it's going up for both DMS, but then also total sulfur, that is, includes the subcomponent of DMS?
That's correct.
Okay. So I think the next question was that previous daily excess emissions, I think the question states were approximately 237 pounds a day of SOx. To your recollection, was that the previous estimate of excess emissions in the variance case?
No, I believe it was around 70 to 75 pounds per day.
Okay. So if the previous was 70 to 75 pounds a day, what is the current estimated excess emissions, so emissions beyond what their permit or the rules would allow?
And the estimated daily average is about 150 pounds per day.
Okay. So the next question refers to some of your prior testimony at the variance hearing. The question states that you indicated at the prior hearing that the DMS reduction before it was going to the H2S removal vessels, that is that cleaning step at Amoresco, showed a 33% reduction, but you weren't able to explain why you were seeing that data. Can you give us an update or a follow-up on that data, given that we have more information today?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the 33% reduction is based on since February 16th to May, but after we getting more data, and from May to December, it was estimated about 11 or 10% of reduction, and if we consider September to December, it's only about 5% reduction. And those values are based on daily average percent reductions. If we talk about specific days, there are some days you have even higher percent reductions, but there are some days have negative percent reductions, which means the outlet concentration is higher than the inlet concentrations. So I really don't think we have enough evidence to say there is any reduction at this time. Yeah.
Okay. So is it fair to say that, the sampling we're getting is just quite variable from day to day, and it's hard to make really clear conclusions as to the trend line?
Right, correct. And as you can see on the graph, the concentration within the landfill gas varies so much. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to step back for a minute. And when we're talking about these excess emissions, we're talking about, over 100 pounds per day of excess sulfur. Firstly, I want to understand, is all of that sulfur that's considered excess, is it pre or post combustion that we're talking about?
And they are all from post-combustion from the turbine flares.
So why would that matter in terms of what is the chemical constituent of the sulfur, or why does that matter for emissions generally?
So, okay, do you mind just repeat?
Sure. So can you explain why is it important to make a distinction between, say, just, surface level emissions of, coming off the landfill, for example, versus here we're talking about excess emissions, but they're from combustion, either through a turbine or a flare.
Right. So from like the raw landfills from the surface of the landfill contains so many like we call it toxic air contaminants. But through flare and turbines combustions, we converted those toxic air contaminant to SOx emissions.
Okay, so is it fair to say that as part of the combustion process, we're losing a lot of the volatile organic compounds that may include toxics?
That's correct.
Okay, and we're also seeing less as hydrogen sulfide, which is also a toxic. Is that correct?
Yes,
So we're seeing predominantly post-combustion emissions of SOx, even though we might, for calculation purposes, calculate it as a different component. It is in actuality SOx.
yes.
Okay. To your understanding, is SOx a toxic air contaminant?
Based on the Rule 1401, it is not a toxic air contaminant.
Okay. So I think there's a question of, should we be doing dispersion modeling in looking at these sort of excess emissions and how they would get to the community? I want to step back from a minute and ask you about when we're first putting in these turbines, first putting in that flare at Amoresco, did we look at things like dispersion? Did we do any kind of modeling when they first installed this equipment?
And during our normal permitting processing, we usually do some sort of modeling, but Rule 1303 does not require we do a modeling for SOx.
Okay. So is it fair to say that at the time that these were initially permitted units, the gas that was coming to Amoresco was quite different than what the gas that we have seeing going to Amoresco today?
That is true, yeah.
Okay. But the main primary difference of concern in terms of rule violation is a difference in SOx. Is that fair?
Yes,
And so even the original rule requirements didn't require modeling for SOx. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay. So to the best of your knowledge, I want to ask one of his other questions was, what, if any, other measures could be taken at the combustion sources, specifically the turbines, to reduce SOx emissions?
At this moment, we really are not aware of any that can do that.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all of my questions.
Okay, Mr. Potash, did you have questions for this witness?
No questions for this witness. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Board members? Mr. Balagopalan?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Paito. Just to clarify I think the excess emission, what is the excess emission? About 75 pounds per day?
That was previously
What is it now?
150 pounds per day.
That's excess above the
Yes, that's correct.
150. So that's about 27 tons per year of excess emissions of SOx.
I have to calculate that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let me just do that. 150, assuming that's 365, right? And 2000. All right, about 27 tons additional SOx emission into the atmosphere, excess, basically. Okay, and so the concern I had with the order is, while yes, I agree that the order, we address in the regular variance some of the control measures and what need to be done. But since then, we have heard from Chiquita, the last hearing at Chiquita, and all the issues. And I'm coming to my question, so I'm not trying to make a statement here. Is there's a lot more going on with DMS and sulfur emission, and they're not sure exactly when they can get it under control. You've heard the testimony, correct? So this is going to be an ongoing problem for maybe, right now the order abatements for until 2025, but we don't know, it might go beyond, right? So my concern is, while yes, it is a beneficial use project, it is definitely beneficial to generate electricity and then sell it to the grid, and it's good, but there's still a responsibility of the source. So I'm just pointing the finger to Chiquita and say, hey, it's their fault. We got creating this high sulfur. Also to look at something to reduce at, at the source, and so let me ask you a question regarding that. I know there are control measures for reducing H2S and looks like the carbon adsorber and frequent changing. And the only one, there isn't any, as far as I can see, for DMS. There was a statement by in Mr. And Mr. McCallan's Andrew McCallan's declaration that they looked at something, but again, it was only looking at they did attempt to mitigate the self-exceedance, but only effective in partial removal H2S. There's nothing indicated on any action taken or investigation, to look at DMS removal and other technologies, ongoing basis, not to just say, there's nothing we can do because it's all coming from Chiquita. There's nothing we can do at our end. And I have a disagreement with that. I think there should be more effort looked at, more investigation, more pilot studies or something for DMS removal. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so for Chiquita, it has been previously have been ordered to do such investigation and have been reported back as no known technology to reduce DMS. So
Okay. No, but there was a requirement to investigate. Let me,
there was, yes.
and what was you saying the investigation resulted in?
There is no technology that could mitigate or reduce DMS.
So do you know what investigation they did and how, and why is it not ongoing to look at other, technologies?
That I probably have to look back into my notes and get back to you.
Okay. Let me go back to then the other question I had. That was the reason for the if there's 150 tons a year approximately coming excess emission from the combustion sources, the two turbines and flares. Oh, I'm sorry, not sorry, 27 tons. Sorry, I stand corrected. 150 pounds. So it's excess emission. Those are SOx. While SOx is not on the toxic air contaminant list, it is a criteria pollutant, correct? And there are the standards for it also. Ambient air quality standards for SOx.
Yes, I would think so, yeah.
And you also aware that Chiquita is monitoring for TRS, total reduced sulfur, and H2S at selected sites, MS4, MS10, whatever the destination is at the facility, and they're looking at ongoing monitoring for total reduced sulfur.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Okay. Now, do you know how far this facility is from Chiquita, from the main landfill where they're located, and what impact? Let me answer that question first.
Where they're located?
Mm-hmm.
They are located within the landfill.
Within, so when you say within, not on the active, where in relationship, I know we don't have a map, but, not near the active site, so they're quite, because this is a pipe to them, the facility, right? So how far away they are. And the reason I'm asking is the emissions from the source, could they have an impact on who are the residents nearby? Could they, you have 27 tons more of sulfur dioxide, which is an irritant, and we can go into other properties of sulfur dioxide on the community, and what, and should there, and that's the question I had, should there be, and that's the reason for the dispersion modeling, just to show which areas may be impacted by the flow. And if there's already been covered by Chiquita, then it's okay. But if there are other communities that are impacted because of the flow, then should there be some additional monitoring for sulfur for that community is the question I asked. and raised in about the modeling. I know that you don't have to do for Rec 13, you don't have to do modeling for SOX and, VOC, basically. So that's a question I had. And so let me frame that in a question. As far as you know, you don't know who is affected by the additional 27 tons of sulfur dioxide emission in the community, if any, are affected.
I probably have to look into that question a little bit more.
And
Because
how would you do that? When you say look into it, how would you look into it?
we do have some sort of modeling we have done probably in the original permitting processing, and that can reflect on how SOX.
And should the burden be, and that's what I wanted this not to be a consent hearing, because I wanted to raise this issue, the burden be on the facility to conduct that modeling and provide it to the district for review. A more detailed modeling. I don't know what was done in the permitting. Should there be a request made by this board, or at least, to request the petition, the respondent to do some dispersion modeling? And maybe that'll show, yes, that there's no impact, or the areas impacted are already been covered. It's at the landfill, And so my question to you is it more better if the source does it, follow the protocol, submit it for review to the district, instead of you going to look at what was done before?
Yeah, I think I have to discuss internally.
Okay.
Before.
And that's one of the concern I had was because of it's going to be for a year or more, we don't know. There is nothing in this order that is abating DMS, which is the main issue we have right now. I mean, not the main issue. Yes, the DMS is increasing, as you indicated, and it looks like there was an attempt to look at DMS control and said, okay, no, I don't think anything works, but I think there should be more investigation. There should be, maybe the source should be funding a study, providing grants to some research organization. I know I'm doing a state here, not a question, so I'll rephrase that. Do you think it's beneficial to do further studies on DMS removal technologies?
So if I could just briefly, I do think that you're asking him for a position on behalf of the district, and if I could respectfully, I'm willing to consider that issue. I would like to just take it back to discuss with our client. Like, there's more than just the engineering division, and I would like the opportunity maybe to briefly go off the record to try and keep this as a stipulated order. To discuss it with the respondent as well, but we will take that consideration back.
Then can I give you those two?
Sure.
So one is to assess the impact, because you got 27 tons. If there was they could, to do dispersion modeling, if there's one previously done, they could just use that and just adjust for the flow and resubmit it. That's one. And so that can identify areas of localized impact. And then that is to identify then whether there should be on-site monitoring like Chiquita is doing right now for the community for total sulfur. That's one. Two, I think there should be further investigation on DMS removal. It cannot just say we looked at it and it's not working, that's it, we can't do anything. So I think there should be, if, they may not, Ameresco may not have the expertise for that, but they should hire somebody or fund some research project, because this is a long-term project. This might be going on for years, and DMS is going up, and DMS is, is an issue. So, and the reason for the high total sulfur looks like you can see the DMS is, is contributing quite a large percentage to it. The carbon is very effective in removing H2S. And that's what the comment said. We looked at it, H2S, but I didn't see any reference to DMS. So I think that there should be more investigation, even if, okay, great. And I'm short of, so those are the 2 points, and I'll talk later, on that. If you wanted, whenever you wish to discuss it.
Okay, we can go, when did you want to do this going off?
I would do it just prior to deliberations, just in case
Okay.
other board
Okay.
members have questions.
Yes, let me get through my questions as well. You mentioned that the sulfur was post-combustion. Whenever I hear the word combustion, that tells me there's particulate matter involved. Now, is there particulate matter as well after the fact, or is it just before?
Yes, there is PM after fact, but it was evaluated as part of the engineer permitting processing.
Okay, so did you measure what the PM was?
I did not, but
Is
I'm
there-
sure
did
source tests,
somebody?
yes, source tests have.
Okay, I would like that information, number one. Number two, what is the time frame between the increase of the excess emissions that went from 72 to 75 pounds per day to the 150 pounds per day? What was the time frame?
That's a range, so that's a
Okay, it's a
daily
range,
average.
but what was the time frame?
So the 75 pound was estimated based on February 16 to May, and the
Of
100
last year?
Correct, yeah. And the 150 pound was calculated from February to, wait, not from February, from May to December.
So 6 months? Are you saying it was 6 months?
Correct. Yeah.
That's a pretty short time for it to double, basically.
It's a range, so.
I understand that it's a range, but it's still, the numbers that you're giving us, it doubled in that 6-month period. I agree with Mr. Balagopalan that I don't see anything in regards to, and how is this going to affect the public? And where is this exactly that it is in reference to what he mentioned, excuse me, the actual facility and what community is that affecting? Which way is this going? The other thing I'm really concerned about, and I want you to take this seriously and do the report that Mr. Balakopolan suggested, because we don't see anything here in reference to how is this going to affect the community. And the last thing I want to see here, because I'm seeing such an increase, I don't want this to become a Porter Ranch Gas Company situation. And I see it, if you can't get a handle on this, that's what's happening. And how is this going to affect the public that is immediately, they're right across the street in some cases. So it's very important, and it bewilders me why that wasn't in consideration and included to present to the hearing board. Any comment on that?
Madam Chair, is there a question?
Yeah,
of
that's the
gentleman?
question. Why wasn't it considered? Why wasn't there some type of a report that would have tell us how it's affecting the public?
So I'm a air quality engineer.
I
I cannot
understand that.
speak on the health impact wise. And we doing our normal permit processing, SOx is not a toxic contaminant, and we do not usually evaluate the health impact.
I understand that that's not part of your purview, but you are here collectively representing the district, and you're here for us to ask you questions. Well, obviously, that's going to be part of our question, is in the totality, how is this going to affect the public? I mean, aren't we here to protect the public?
So if I may, Madam Chair, I hear the board members' questions, and we are willing to go back to discuss that. I would respectfully ask that this witness maybe can't speak for the entirety of the district. That is a complex question that involves multiple divisions, and he's only here for our engineering division to speak to. But I do hear the board members' questions, and we are willing to go back and consider that.
So, Madam Chair, just a question of you and maybe Mr. Balakapalan. Are there any individuals that you would want to hear from this morning? Perhaps we can take a break, allow the counselor to go and confer, come back, bring those witnesses to answer the questions so that we can move the case along.
Do you have people that would be able to give us those answers?
So I mean, I think we can get you to an answer. I don't know that there's a specific single individual who could provide testimony as to, whether or not, why we made some decision in the past to not impose that. I think we can get you an answer as to, the difference between this facility and Chiquita Canyon landfill. I think there has been a lot of conflation between these two facilities. This is a related incident, but this is not the landfill.
I think
and
we,
so I
I think
think-
we understand that. That's not our question. Our question is, you're telling us that they cannot get a handle on the fact that it's emitting this sulfur and it's doubling in a 6-month period. What is it doing now? This is like another 6-month period that you're going to be, and in regards to the range. My concern is that it's escalating and you can't get a handle on this thing. That you're telling us that there's no technology right now that can help control this. So of course, we're
on
going to
the
have.
technology piece, I'd like to do a brief redirect of this witness, and I think that can illuminate some of that discussion
Okay.
for us.
Okay.
If the board member, I'm willing to hold that until the board member's questions are completed, but I think there is a little bit more to understand on the piece of investigating further technology.
And since Mr. Ali asked the question, and I think you have a witness, I do have a question for the compliance folk before we break.
Sure, I'm happy to call him next.
Okay, thank you.
Can I proceed with a
Sure.
brief redirect?
Go right ahead.
Mr. Chen, you're familiar with the investigation that was required of Chiquita Canyon landfill to evaluate potential additional ways to reduce DMS in landfill gas?
Yes.
Is it correct that under the variance, in order to comply with all permitting rules, Chiquita Canyon landfill had to submit a permit application for potential solutions that would be impacting their equipment as already installed?
That's correct.
Would that same approach be true of Amoresco?
No.
No, they could evaluate potential solutions to DMS at their facility without seeking permitting?
Can you repeat the question?
So in the same way that Chiquita Canyon landfill, before they could test out, say, a new media in their system that treats sulfur, they had to go through a permitting process to comply with the permitting requirements. Would the same be true? Could Amoresco change out their media to try different things that might better treat DMS? Would they also have to go through permitting?
They do have to get permits first, yes.
Do you recall at the variance for Chiquita Canyon landfill, when this requirement was proposed, there was discussion that this could possibly be done under a research permit approach?
That's correct.
And that research permit approach would reduce generally the time frame rather than going through a Title V revision. Is that correct?
Not necessarily.
Okay. So did Chiquita Canyon ever submit a permit application in compliance with that condition?
They did submit an application.
To the best of your knowledge, what happened to that application?
They did not provide enough informations and it was rejected.
Was it rejected on the merits, or was it rejected as an incomplete application?
It was incomplete application.
So based on the best of their investigation, there wasn't even sufficient information to go through the permitting process?
That's correct.
So if we imposed the same requirement, if we just essentially mirrored that same thing of Amoresco, to your understanding, would we get different results? Like, it's worth doing that? Or is there another approach that we could potentially take?
Personally, I don't think it's worth to pursuing that route. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if you don't think that's the right approach, then what do you think is the right approach that they should take?
I have to discuss with my team first. Yeah.
So that will be also a part of the questions
Yes,
that you can answer?
that's part of why we want to go back. I mean, based on what we have done, I think that should inform going forward.
Okay.
But again, complex question, and we would respectfully ask for time to figure that out.
Okay. Mr. Potash,
Madam Chair, may I examine the witness?
you have another question for him? Go ahead.
Thank you. If Amoresco were to cease operations, what would happen to the landfill gas that Amoresco is currently combusting to generate renewable electricity?
The landfill operator has to deal with it.
Would that decrease SOx emissions if Amoresco were to shut down and the landfill operator were forced to deal with that landfill gas?
That's not a yes or no question, but landfill will not stop generating landfill gas, so it has to go somewhere if it's not going to Amoresco.
And is it accurate to the extent you know, and I understand this may be outside your area of expertise as compliance staff, that the distance from the landfill flares where the landfill combusts landfill gas to Amoresco's turbines is approximately 1,000 feet?
I do not have the number in my mind, so.
And assuming hypothetically that 1,000 feet is the distance between the landfill flares and Amoresco's turbines, would you anticipate, and again, recognizing that this may be outside your area of expertise as compliance staff, that there would be a material difference in impacts to residential receptors if emissions occurred from the landfill flares as opposed to Amoresco's turbines?
I do have to evaluate that before I can say a yes or no answer. Yeah.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you. And Mr. Ali?
Madam Chair, is there anyone who might can answer the councilor's questions?
On staff?
Yeah, because the longer we go, there's more questions. The more we get into it, rather, there are more questions, and it just seems as if the gentleman is doing a phenomenal job within his capacity, but there are other folk who
Personnel.
may be able to testify and provide a different level of complexity as well, or granularity to the overall discourse. And at this point, we're televised and it just looks as if no one has an answer. So places the hearing board in a very
Roberts,
inexplicable position.
how long do you think it would take you to get that information?
So I mean, I do have a supervising engineer who is also familiar with the facility here today, but respectfully, these are complex questions that no engineer is going to be able to give you a finite answer. I mean, that question respectfully from the respondent, while I hear that it's a valid question, it would take a complex analysis before an engineer could, testify under penalty of perjury as to an answer. I'm happy to call the supervising engineer. Respectfully, those are the best two witnesses. They are the most familiar with the permit and this facility. They deal with this facility day in and day out. They are familiar with this issue. They are familiar with the landfill. They are the best witnesses to speak to this case. And respectfully, it's not a lack of knowledge. This is a very complex situation that requires careful engineering analysis.
I have to agree with Ms. Roberts. I don't think you can just call a witness from the district without having the modeling of the data to look at. So that's why I was going to propose that, and I think in my question that maybe some model, even at 1,000 feet, you have two elevated sources, the gas turbines and the flare. So the dispersion could, depending on the terrain and the flow, could flow. And the only way to know that is by having the data. And I don't think any expert here can say yes or no without having some data before them. So it's not fair to do
Right,
that.
Madam Chair, and I agree with you, Mr. Balakaplan, I agree with Ms. Roberts, which is kind of why I posed the scenario, which now leads me to perhaps continuing this matter to the 21st, which would give folks an opportunity to come back with whatever information, because at this point, it's very difficult for me to even vote. If you're saying that you've raised a tremendous amount of questions, they're part of the exhibit. If there cannot be any answers, whether today, tomorrow, next week, et cetera, then perhaps the matter ought to be continued until questions can be provided.
Respectfully, I think we just continuing to the 21st will not be sufficient unless they do some modeling, and I think that's why proposing a condition of when it's appropriate to have the parties conduct modeling to assess the impact, if any, and then come back after the results of the modeling. And if both parties stipulate to that, then we will have a set of data which the experts could use. So I think just postponing, to a later date without getting the data will be not useful.
I can roll with what you just said.
Mr. Pearman?
Also, doesn't the variance expire today?
Right.
Yes, it does.
So we can't just continue it. We need to, we
Right.
have to
The order
give it
here.
some protection. So I don't go for that either. That was an interesting idea.
Yes, today.
Yes, the variance by its own terms ends today.
Is there some possibility, I guess we're getting into almost a relation, but is there a way to look at
I think you're.
agreeing to do some sort of studying, not take action, but something allow both to do some more testing, studying, and since if we grant an order, we can have you come back for a status.
Yeah. Yes, I think that the district is willing to entertain and can try and craft some language as to a potential study that the respondent could undertake and could get results to the board that would answer some of these questions. I do think that is a preferential path over continuing this hearing.
Yeah, and I just have to add this point. I think it probably would have been a lot easier, Madam Chair, to have had a pre-conference hearing because there's information. For example, the variance was removed from calendar.
The modification to the variance, yes.
Okay, so had that been on calendar, then could we have approached this differently and took a different path?
The district would have opposed. That is on record in the petition for the order for abatement. The district was opposed to any modification that would extend the variance beyond today.
Yeah, but there has to be an anticipation of board members' questions. The board is not a perfunctory agent. And so we're not going to just simply summarily approve recommendations that are brought forth. There has to be deliberation and there's to be ebb and flow. And so now we're in a precarious position. We have to go with the Balaka-Palan amendment to the conditions. Hopefully both parties would indeed stipulate, but that factor should have been considered as a part of the scenario prior to appearing here today.
Well, at the time when we received this, we assumed that both parts of 2 and 4 were going to be heard. But when it was decided that 2 was going to be taken off, I don't think there was enough time to have thought about having a pre-conference hearing. Best case scenario, yes. In retrospect, yes. But the way things rolled out, that didn't work out, so it wasn't even a consideration. Mr. Balagappan, did you have a comment? Oh, okay. So in this case, we are going to have to vote on something today based on the fact that that variance ends today, and also with an amendment to the conditions that, as Mr. Balagappan mentioned, and as I mentioned, that in the interim, that they get all of that information, possibly conduct a study. Mr. Pearman also suggested that they come back on a status report and give us that information. My concern would be when that status report would be. How long from this point would we have that status report? What's your estimate of gathering all of that information and being able to come back to us, Ms. Roberts?
I would like to, check in with my staff on how long they think that study would take. I would recommend setting the status at, a point after that reporting is complete, so you would have that data. I would also just float that currently Chiquita Canyon landfill has a status hearing towards the end of April. I think putting it after that, really the leader of this is the landfill. So having whatever information that may come out of that hearing kind of helps inform this. So this is kind of, a downstream, if you will, of the landfill. So I would put those 2 parameters as a potential date. I will suggest a time once I confer with staff.
Let me ask you this also. Let's say, okay, the scenario being that Chiquita's hearing comes first. In the interim, you're conducting all of the research to be able to come back to us. What is being done? Will there be an effort in the interim to find a solution, not just wait for a report? Will there be work that's being done during this time?
The conditions as stipulated to by the parties do require daily actions from Amoresco. And I would defer to, I think, further testimony from Mr. McClelland, the respondent's witness. But I think there is a fair case that there is limited actions that can be directly taken by Amoresco that will address this. The root cause of what is happening and causing the excess emissions here is at the landfill. Amoresco, this facility does not have control over that landfill. So there is a limitation on what they are able to do. To the extent that they are able to take actions at their own facility, those are incorporated into this order, and that order is stipulated too.
Thank you. Mr. Pearman.
So I think we should let them have some time to discuss things, and as Ms. Roberts indicated, we have to be careful because Amoresco can't be asked to do stuff that being a mere lessee, they had control over.
Right.
So we can't just say you do studies that require access and permission. So let them spend some time to craft an appropriate language, and let's see if we accept it.
And how long do you think that would take, Ms. Roberts?
I would suggest maybe 20 minutes. I would say recommend potentially because you also have a consent calendar item that may be moving to that item. And then at the conclusion, the parties here could probably come back.
Well, why
with
don't we do
proposed
this?
language.
Why don't we take a 20-minute break? We need a morning break anyway. And then you can come back to us in 20 minutes, hopefully, and see what you've come up with.
Sure.
All right, so we're off the record for 20 minutes. Paul, if you can start the recording again. Okay, yeah. In reference to this case, before we go to the consent.
I mean, just so they know they can activate.
Oh, okay. Do we have anybody? But nobody that's raised their hand. Okay, all right. Right. Dr. Abraham, are you there?
Yes, Dr. Abrams here.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and go to the consent item that is on the agenda while the other two are deliberating on the Amoresco issue. So they're gonna deliberate while we go through this consent for LADWP. Okay, and that would be case number 1263-80 regarding a regular variance regarding rules 203, 2004, and 3002. This is on consent. And we do have some items to mark for exhibits. The joint stipulation to place the matter on consent is number 3. The declaration of Ian Guthrie for DWP is number 4. And the findings and decision of the hearing, the proposed findings and decision, that is number 5. And then we also had an email dated Tuesday, February 6th, and that is HB1. Okay. Did you want to start any deliberation on this item?
Well, just, we've kind of seen this particular and general issue before. The findings demonstrate, again, this GE's turbine issues. GE's turbine issues and the time it takes to get replaced, et cetera, and the critical nature of the facility are really the cause of the issue and why it's before us. Exhibit 5 does demonstrate, and I think I can support the 6 findings as stated therein. I don't think it's controversial from our standpoint.
Any other comments, board members? I agree with Mr. Pearman. I know that this has been taking quite a long time, but evidently the district and DWP are on the same page in reference to trying to resolve this. Mr. Balagopalan?
No, just add that they were, I think maybe Mr. Pearman mentioned, we granted an interim variance on January 1, 2024 for, and essentially the conditions are all the same for the regular variance, no change. So, so I think we made the 6 findings then. I think still make the 6 findings today.
Okay. And did you want to go over the 6 findings or? Either I can do that or if you'd like to, Mr. Balagopalan.
Well, I think you did the motion last time, so if you want to.
Okay, sure. All right, in reference to the petitioner is in violation of Rule 41701 as well as the ones that we mentioned. And number 2, that this is beyond their reasonable control as stated earlier. The closing or taking would not be, it would be without corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants. The petitioner for the variance has given consideration to curtailing the source in lieu of obtaining a variance. And during the period the variance has been in effect, the petitioner will reduce the excess emissions to the maximum extent feasible. And during the period of the variance, while it is in effect, the petitioner will monitor or otherwise quantify their emission levels for the source if requested to do so by the district, and report these omissions to the district pursuant to a schedule established by the district. And all of that is in their findings and decisions. So with that, any other discussion? Okay, Mr. Bellagio,
Just that they're not operating, so there are no excess emissions, nothing to
Correct.
quantify at
correct.
this point.
Okay,
Oh, is it the motion?
I haven't quite yet, but I can go ahead and just
Doesn't
make
make
the
one.
motion real quickly in the matter of LADWP, case number 126380. This is a matter that was taken up previously, as was mentioned. Let's see if I don't have the exact location. On the petition. Do you have that address, Mr. Balakopuan?
Yes, yes, yes. The address is 6801 East Second Street, Long Beach, California, 90803. And the facility ID is 800074.
Thank you so much. Okay, and in reference to the rule that they are in violation as stated originally, it is in regards to rules 203, 2004, and 3002. Having mentioned all of the information in regards to this location and this equipment, as was mentioned, they are not operating, so there are no emissions in reference to this. And I move that we do vote for and pass for the regular variance.
If I
Madam
may
Chair,
add, it's condition 28.3, D 28.3.
Yes, thank you for that addition.
second.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, with that, how do you vote, Mr. Ali?
Aye.
Mr. Pearman,
Aye.
Dr. Abraham,
Aye.
Mr. Balagopuan?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. So it's unanimous. We pass this request for a regular variance on consent, and that closes that matter.
Do we want to take another recess for a few minutes to let them?
About how much longer do you think that you need, Ms. Roberts?
Maybe 10 minutes.
Okay. We're off the record for another 10 minutes. Dr. Abraham, are you there?
Correct, I'm here.
Okay. Are we good to go? Ms. Roberts?
Maybe, 3 more minutes. I'm just trying to get language to them.
Okay.
I think we have a
That's fine.
pretty close.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Whoa, are you okay? Yeah. It's normally me. Normally that's me falling all over the place. All right, everybody's ready, good to go. Paul, if you can restart, or are we already recording? Okay, great. So we're back on the record, and I'm going to go ahead and defer to you, Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. If I may, I would recall Mr. Chen, and I think it would be helpful for him to walk through what I think are potential additional conditions that would be stipulated. So Mr. Chen, I'm going to pull these up on screen, and hopefully you can kind of help us walk through. I'm going to try and make that a little bit larger. So we're proposing to add, this would be a new condition number 8 into the proposed order for abatement. Can you just walk us through generally what is the proposed condition 8 here? What does that require?
Right, so we first want them to provide us a protocol, air dispersion modeling analysis protocol to us first. And we will be reviewing it and approve it. And the modeling protocol should analyze the SOx emission and to determine the impact zone and compared to the national and the California air quality standards. Yeah.
And so when we refer to the national and California ambient, or at least the national ambient air quality standards, is that the same thing as the looking at criteria pollutants that Mr. Balagopalan had asked you about?
Yes.
Okay. And so just for the timing, the parties are proposing that the protocol would be submitted by the respondent by when?
Protocol will be March 5th, 2024.
And then when do we get the final report of when is this going to be completed?
Within 30 days of written approval from us.
Okay, so just to your understanding, do you think that is a reasonable time frame to be able to, one, come up with this protocol, but then also be able to conduct the protocol?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I want to scroll down to the new proposed condition number 9. So proposed condition number 9 is addressing this idea of further research on how do we remove DMS from landfill gas. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I want to ask you first, it refers to a report on DMS removal that's specified in a particular condition of an abatement in case number 6177-4. That's the Chiquita Canyon landfill abatement order. Is that correct?
Yes.
So to your understanding, does that abatement order require a report that is looking into as kind of a research investigation or a literature review of possible ways to remove DMS from landfill gas?
That's correct, yeah.
And so what would this condition do separate from that report?
So I think it is reasonable for us, for everybody, to review that report first, and then for Ameresco to get into the study from there, based on the report, yeah.
So this new condition would require basically after that report comes out from Chiquita Canyon landfill, the respondent would have 2 months to prepare a proposal of how to do lab scale research or testing, furthering the findings of Chiquita's report. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
It is not specifying carrying out that proposal. Is that correct?
Can you repeat that?
As written, this is just ending with a proposal for lab studies. It's not actually carrying out the lab studies yet.
That's correct, yeah.
And then lastly, we are proposing to add a status modification hearing sometime for the month of July. Is that correct?
Yes.
Would that allow the parties to be able to come back and evaluate what that proposal is, what the cost and timing estimates of that proposal would be?
Yeah, that's a plan, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think those are all my questions for now.
Thank you. Mr. Potash, did you have any questions for that witness?
No questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Board members? Mr. Balagopalan?
Yes, I do. Ms. Roberts, it's a condition on the pilot study condition that. Yes. Now, I just wanted to clarify the understanding, and I know it's referring to the Chiquita. Now, they're doing the DMS to find out what's causing DMS, in the landfill. We're talking about a little different situation here. We're talking about the landfill gas that has, before that comes to the air facility with the already DMS in it, and what they can do scrubber, and it, I think they tried carbon, it didn't work, something else scrubber. So I wanted to differentiate, the study done by Chiquita looking at causes of DMS at the landfill versus removal once it's in the gas before it's combusted. Does that draw the distinction there here? Because I cannot pull up that abatement order. I think I do have it, but so I just want to be clear that that Amoresco on their side, before they combust, they do, I mean, yeah, it's good to see what Chiquita has found, but nevertheless, they should be doing removal of the DMS from the landfill gas before they combust. So that's a separate study, kind of, I don't know if it's tied in with how that ties in, but.
So if I can, before the witness responds, I can try and pull up the Chiquita Canyon abatement order, but
okay.
I do think that you're referring to two different reports. There's a lot of reports required under that. The one that's referred to in 12G1 is actually, it's a study into known and possible methods for effective treatment of DMS and preventative mechanisms for DMS formation in landfill gas, including an assessment of other landfills, review of scientific studies. So it is about treatment of DMS as well as preventing the formation. It would be both, but we do think it would provide helpful information for this study.
Right. No, I agree. I think it'll provide you. I just want to draw the distinction that's from the landfill and looking at what causing DMS in the landfill. This is, I think from what we heard the last time, and I'm not testifying, I mean, and Mr. Baitong, you were here, they have not been able to identify a root cause for DMS yet. There's still ongoing investigation. So the reality is there's high amount of DMS in the landfill gas that is combusted. So Amoresco has to look at some other method independently and in conjunction with Chiquita to see if there's a feasibility of removing it before they combust, scrubbing or something else, some kind of scrubbing solution, whatever is out there in the literature, do literature search and so forth. So I just want to draw the distinction, and do you agree there's a distinction between what that makes sense of what I'm trying to say? I'm trying to draw the distinction between the two.
I think the study should cover what the condition requires, like them to do, basically to further test, do actual test, right? So Chiquita will do basically what you were saying, literature review and stuff, to find out what's out there. And Amoresco, based on this condition, is they have to propose with a experimental setup and stuff. Yeah.
Okay. I want, again, there are two different purpose. I just want to clarify, get for the record, there's different in purpose of the study, basically,
So I pulled up, this is the issued findings and decisions for Chiquita Canyon. Sorry, this is the findings and decisions that were issued in Chiquita Canyon landfill, and this page is looking at the reference condition. This is condition 12G1. So I'm happy to kind of walk through that.
No, I can see that, and that says effective treatment and preventive mechanism. That is very good, and I'm
so
sure.
If I
but
could,
what about once it's,
So I think when you look at this, it does say provide a report that detailing the findings and proposals for implementation of the treatment methods, right? So there is a focus on treatment, and I agree that not the entirety of the report might be helpful to the Amoresco specifically, but we think that component of it, looking at treating DMS, is what should be the springboard for coming up with a proposal. How do you do that on a lab scale for Amoresco?
I appreciate that, and I just want to draw the distinction: treatment to reduce DMS formation in the landfill gas versus post-treatment landfill gas, which has DMS, is two different things, and so it'll be useful from the study so they can also utilize it, but I think it should not wait per se for Amoresco to do the literature search and reach out there to see if there's something out there. Instead of just waiting, I know they have no control, but they do have a responsibility, is what I'm going to say, to do that.
So I think from the district's perspective is we don't know that there is a good result from just reviewing literature. This is going to be a testing and sort of evaluating sort of approach that is, if at all, we're going to find some kind of method to treat DMS. And there is a valid concern, lab scale level testing is not necessarily easy. It's not short. It's not free, certainly. The idea of if we don't have any leads whatsoever, it's really hard to even start. It's hard to know where to start. So the idea is take what this other facility, Chiquita Canyon, is already doing to do that literature review to come up with essentially leads. Amoresco can then kind of pick up the baton from there and say, that's the best lead we have. Let's do that on lab scale and see if it would work. The literature suggests maybe let's put that into practice and actually test it. The idea of requiring Amoresco to immediately go into the lab tomorrow, I agree that would be faster, but I don't know that it's more helpful. If they don't have that lead and until Chiquita comes up with something and does that literature review, we don't know that doing two literature reviews in parallel is going to be meaningfully different.
Okay. Again, I'll just state there's the distinction. Chiquita is interested in suppressing the formation of DMS in the landfill. They, and
I agree. And going forward after that report,
right,
Chiquita's focus is going to be suppressing, and Amoresco can take the lead on treatment.
Treatment,
and
yes.
that seems like a fair distinction.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
But for this single first report from Chiquita, it is looking at both and can be the springboard for both going forward, we think.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Is this report going to include, is it going to include a report of where exactly, which communities are being affected?
So the dispersion model but the report they were talking about is a different thing.
Well, I understand that, but in its entirety, overall, are we going to get information someplace, somewhere, which communities specifically are closest to the source and who's going to be affected the most within that community?
Yes, the condition A upon screen they will have to submit a protocol first, and then they will conduct the dispersion model to identify the impact zone.
Okay, and how are you going to do that? Are you going to be mobile collection?
It's a modeling. Yeah.
Just modeling.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, it would not be the district that's doing this. This is a requirement of the respondent to conduct this modeling.
It's not exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about.
If I may add, the modeling is the first step, because the modeling then can access the high impact area and the areas that they would focus on before doing the on-site monitoring. So,
okay,
that model will give.
But I want to know that that's next step is going to be.
Yeah, I think they indicated impact areas, so I think that covers your concern.
Yeah.
Okay, where does it? Because I
line
can't see
18,
that far.
if you look at that,
line 18.
to determine any impact zone of emissions. So
that's going to come after
the modeling is done. While it's not the most accurate, but it's the ground truth. Somewhat to what may be found on the ground, basically, which areas may be ones with high impact. So that's and normally that's sort of the steps you do the modeling and then you go
I
the next step.
understand that. Okay, so once they do that, once they do the on-site, is there going to be a report of just the location and what area, what neighborhood is being affected? are there going to be any reports or information regarding health effects?
I don't believe this is our purview, health effect wise. Yeah.
So I think the witness can answer as to, I don't think this condition would speak to health effects. I think you could take the results of it and maybe give that to a health effects person to draw some conclusions potentially.
You mean like a third party?
Potentially. Health effects are not generally speaking within the purview of the AQMD. That I would have to defer you to the County Department of Public Health. I can assure you they're quite involved in this incident generally. I think that's why you saw them at the Chiquita hearing. I think, we can certainly ensure that this report would be given to the Department of Public Health, but I can't order them to do anything.
I
with it.
understand that. I just would love to see a multi-agency effort, collective effort to try to resolve this, to try to give that community some level of relief and to know what they are facing, because I think they're in a world of hurt in reference to not just the odor situation, just everything. So many things are happening within that community that are a result of that landfill, whether it's this particular situation or whether it's the one that Chiquita is addressing. It's the people who are paying the price are the people who live there. And I know that I understand that we're not a health agency. However, I think it's our responsibility to at least make sure that there is some type of multi-agency, even if we pull in academia, to make sure that we address this. And I'm not saying we AQMD, I'm saying we collectively as a community who have sympathy for the people who live there.
Madam Chair, can I add to that?
Yes,
Dr. Abraham.
Dr. Abraham.
Yes, I was just going to add, so yesterday, the County Department of Public Health Los Angeles County, there was an independent health risk evaluation of the community air quality impacts that was published and released to the public regarding Chiquita Canyon landfill odor incident. Again, it did highlight the concerns related to volatile organic compounds, particularly carbon tetrachloride, as well as concerns that we're continuing to have around the dimethyl sulfide and benzene. And clearly there's plenty of evidence to demonstrate a link between those exposures and these symptoms that the community and public are facing. However, much harder to definitely attribute it to Chiquita and source testing, et cetera. So it's something that I know the county, as well as other planning bodies and entities within the county government are looking at. And so to that point that Council Roberts mentioned, it's, definitely a multi-agency approach. There's lots of folks that are doing various studies. So from the public health standpoint, they are looking at those independently, the exposures, the risks, the harms, and it sounds like there will be further future public hearings on that. So just I wanted to add, as a public health advocate, as the physician member on this board, that I do believe that the LA County Department of Public Health is taking this very seriously as a public health emergency. Thank you.
Dr. Abraham, thank you very much. Okay, are there any other questions? All right. So were you going to present any other witnesses, Ms. Roberts?
I know Mr. Balagopalan had questions for our compliance staff, so I'm happy to call them next if we're finished with engineering staff.
Yes, and I just said, well, the question is just about orders and from this location, if there were any, I just wanted to get the inspector on record what he observed.
Sure, I'm happy to call Mr. Gerardo Vergara.
Madam Chair, so just for clarity, all of our concerns have been, I assume, included or encapsulated in the agreement. So how many more witnesses will we bring? Would this just be the only witness? Or are we compelling?
Well, we have the other witness that Ms. Roberts mentioned, then we do have the respondent's
Yes,
witness.
but there are no additional witnesses other than these two individuals?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, very well, thank you.
Good morning. Could I have you state and spell your name for the record?
Hello, good morning. My name is Gerardo Vergara. First name Gerardo, Gerardo. Last name Vergara, V as in Victor, Ergara.
And could you confirm that you took the oath this morning?
I did.
Could you tell us what's your title with the South Coast AQMD?
I am an air quality inspector. I've been in the district for 5 years under the Toxics and Waste Management Division.
And in your role with the AQMD, are you familiar with the Amoresco Chiquita Energy Facility?
I am.
Are you also familiar with the related Chiquita Canyon landfill?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to defer to Mr. Balagopalan or other hearing board questions.
If, Mr. Potash, any
You're
question
right.
before I go?
Yes, thank you.
No questions. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Vergara, well, it's afternoon now, good afternoon. Just, you have been to that location, Amoresco's site where they're doing the flaring and the gas turbine?
Yes, I've been to Amoresco.
And are there any, did you observe any odors from around this facility or from the operation? Let me put it that way.
At this time, when we were on site, the facility was closed for operations. We did not really detect any major odors during our inspection.
Okay, have you in the past had any complaints coming from that site?
Not specifically. We have not received any specific complaints against Amoresco, no.
And they are, where about, I think Mr. Potash said about 1,000 feet away from, where are they located in conjunction with the landfill?
Yeah, Amoresco is located northeast of, within the Chiquita Canyon landfill of the area, within 1,000 feet of the flare station, of Chiquita Canyon's flare station, give or take 1,000 feet. That is correct.
Okay, northeast, so that's towards the post office side, that area, is it?
Correct, yeah, the post office.
All right, now that's all I had, thank you. Not no further question.
Any other questions, board members? Dr. Abraham, did you have any questions for this witness?
No questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Let's see. Okay, those are all your witnesses, correct, Ms. Roberts?
No further witnesses, correct?
Okay, Mr. Potash, you want to present your witness?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. McClellan, could you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yeah. It's Andrew McClelland, ANDREW, MCCLELLAND.
And did you take the oath today?
I did.
And could you please describe your role at Amoresco?
Yeah, I'm the environmental compliance manager responsible for the Chiquita Canyon landfill gas to energy plant.
Okay. And could you please describe Amoresco's landfill gas to energy business?
Traditionally, landfill gas escapes into the atmosphere or is flared, resulting in greenhouse gas emissions and smog. Amoresco develops and operates landfill gas to energy projects that use this gas for electricity, and turning a harmful source of waste into a beneficial source of renewable energy.
And could you please describe specifically at Chiquita Canyon what Amoresco does?
Amoresco produces renewable energy by taking landfill gas from Chiquita Canyon landfill and using it to generate electricity. We combust the landfill gas in our turbines to create electricity. We don't own the landfill. That is a totally separate company. The landfill has a well field from which the gas is extracted. The gas is delivered to Amoresco via pipeline, and then we use that gas to fuel two turbines to generate electricity. Amoresco's facility at Chiquita Canyon can produce up to 9.2 megawatts of electricity, enough to supply power each day to between 8 and 10,000 homes.
And what are the environmental benefits of the Amoresco facility operating?
When Amoresco operates, we are powering thousands of homes. We're using a resource that would otherwise be wasted and using it to displace other sources of electricity, which are frequently fossil fuels. So by operating, Amoresco reduces the need for natural gas plant operation and the associated criteria pollutant, TAC, and greenhouse gas emissions. If we didn't operate, the Amoresco understands that the landfill gas would instead be flared by the landfill.
And what would happen if the order for abatement were not approved as is with the additional stipulated conditions that district council displayed a moment ago, and the hearing board sought to impose additional conditions or different conditions on Amoresco to allow continued operation?
Amoresco would likely need to shut down. Amoresco Chiquita Canyon is already in a difficult financial position. We've stretched as far as we can in order to accommodate the daily sampling and sulfur treatment monitoring and treatment that would be required under the stipulated order for abatement.
And if Amoresco were to shut down, what would be the adverse air quality and public health impacts?
If Amoresco stops operating, the methane that is generated at the landfill is simply wasted. Landfill gas is continuously generated through the decomposition process in the landfill. And in the absence of Amoresco's operation, the gas would have to be flared by the landfill. If Amoresco shuts down, there would be a loss of 9.2 megawatts of renewable electricity, which would likely be replaced by fossil fuel generation. If Amoresco shuts down, the electricity that Amoresco generates would need to be replaced by another source, in many cases, natural gas fueled power plants. So Amoresco's operation is able to avoid criteria pollutant, TAC, and GHG emissions that occur from natural gas generation.
And what has Amoresco done in the past to study the mitigation of sulfur emissions from its operations? Have you done any sort of analysis or study in the past to determine if there are feasible steps that you could take?
Yes, elevated non-H2S species of sulfur in the landfill gas delivered to Amoresco is the primary cause of the excess SOx emissions. Amoresco is not aware of any way to feasibly remove non-H2S species from the fuel gas. Amoresco looked closely at this during the variance period, including looking into post-combustion scrubbers and different media that could be used in the existing carbon vessels. Amoresco did not identify any feasible options. The limitations that we found include exorbitant costs, for example, multiple millions of dollars for a SO2 scrubber for post-combustion control. Limited space. It's unclear if an SO2 scrubber could be installed at the existing facilities inside the facility's footprint, and technical infeasibility. For example, the alternative media that we are aware of has rapid breakthrough and would need to be changed out on a near daily basis. The landfill also looked at these issues and determined that there are no feasible options.
And has Amoresco looked at any other alternative beneficial uses?
Yes, our preferred outcome is to be able to operate the turbines, but we are evaluating other options for beneficial use at the Chiquita Canyon landfill. To date, we have not found a beneficial use or a technology that would provide for beneficial use without converting DMS into SOx. While the DMS in the landfill currently ends up as SOx when flared, our understanding of the current rules would prohibit permitting of new beneficial use projects until the DMS levels come down to levels acceptable to the district.
And condition 8 of the revised stipulated order for abatement conditions is presented by district council earlier. Thank you very much. Would require air dispersion modeling analysis from the combustion sources that Ameresco operates. Are you aware, Mr. McClelland, to the extent you have knowledge of the order for abatement applicable to the landfill, is the landfill performing any air dispersion modeling? Does it face any requirement under its order for abatement to perform air dispersion modeling with respect to the combustion sources that the landfill operates?
To my knowledge, no, I don't believe they are performing combustion modeling or dispersion modeling for SOx.
In other words, if Ameresco were to agree to the proposed stipulated order for abatement conditions, Ameresco would be going above and beyond what the landfill is doing to perform dispersion modeling from combustion sources, despite the fact that Ameresco has no role in generating the DMS, and despite the fact that if Ameresco were forced to cease operation, that the landfill gas would simply be combusted at the landfill with no beneficial use. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. Just a couple of brief questions, Mr. McClellan. This abatement order would discuss and essentially allow you to continue operating, notwithstanding the district's allegations of excess sulfur in your emissions. Is that right?
That's correct.
But it doesn't require you to continue operating. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Has Ameresco shut down ever in between while it was running under its variants?
We have periodically.
Do you anticipate that you would do the same under this abatement order?
At times, we do have to shut down for maintenance.
Is the facility today operating?
No, it is not.
What was the last day that it was operating?
I believe January 31st.
Okay, so it's possible that the operation would be intermittent. We've heard a lot of kind of estimates of your excess emissions per day, but that assumes that you're operating at full capacity every day. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm sorry. The earlier estimates that were mentioned were an average over the monitoring period. So it varies day to day.
Okay, and I think Mr. Balagopalan, for example, I think walked through with our district engineer kind of a summation calculation. If we assume, 150 pounds per day over the course of a year, that would average, that would sum to about 27 tons per year. That kind of calculation is assuming constant operation. Is that correct?
I don't believe so. Because the daily average that 27 tons of excess SOx was based upon includes periods when the facility was offline or not operating at full load.
Okay. What's the current estimate of when Ameresco might resume operations?
I don't know at this time.
Okay. But is it fair to say that it might not be in the immediate term?
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay. And I think you mentioned that you consider this condition that's up on the screen, to your knowledge, this is above and beyond what Chiquita Canyon landfill is required to do.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Do you disagree that Chiquita Canyon landfill is required to do things like computational fluid dynamic modeling as to their surface emissions?
No, I don't disagree. No, not at all.
Do you disagree that Chiquita Canyon landfill is required to do in-community and on-site fence line continuous monitoring for various pollutants?
No.
So is it fair to say that while they might not be required, Chiquita Canyon landfill might not be required to do this particular study, there is a range of other requirements imposed on Chiquita Canyon landfill regarding their excess emissions?
I would agree with that. I was just speaking to the SOX dispersion modeling.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Board members, do you have questions for this witness? Mr. Balagopalan?
Mr. McKellen, just a few questions. Actually, what's the reason why you're shut down right now?
We have an issue with landfill condensate management that we're working through right now.
So what happens, what is going on with the gas then? It's been flared or?
That's correct. The landfill
is flaring it.
Correct.
You're not flaring or the turbines are not running.
No, we are completely shut down.
So the landfill is taking care of that.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Now in your declaration on item 12, you had mentioned that Ameresco had taken additional measures to mitigate self-accidents and looked at the and it was only effective in partial removal H2S. Can you elaborate a little bit on that and what system that was? And
the system that is being referred to in item 12 is the existing H2S removal vessels at the facility. These two vessels operate on a slipstream in the turbine fuel line. They process about 600 SCFM of fuel. The rest bypasses those vessels and goes directly to the turbines. So that is why it's only effective in partial removal of H2S.
so it's the existing H2S removals
That's correct.
that you replace the media. So you have not looked at a slipstream to maybe a scrubber. I'm talking pre-combustion, not post-combustion. And I think you alluded to the expense of doing post-combustion control. What about pre-combustion, looking at other technologies and for removing SO2 that has been proven, and if you look, I looked up the literature, I'll admit, have you seen anything like that to remove sulfur quite effectively? And I'm not sure how well on DMS, but have you looked at literature such as scrubbers using ammonia hydroxide, sodium hydroxide as a scrubbing solution?
I have not personally looked at the literature. We do have weekly meetings with the Chiquita Canyon landfill. And so we're aware of the trials that they have done with the copper media and the sodium hydroxide scrubber. And while they were found to be effective, they were exhausted very quickly,
Right.
And not feasible, not a feasible option for our facility to implement.
Okay, that's all the question I have. Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Okay, are there any members of the public who have their hand raised that want to make a comment and or provide testimony?
Madam Chair, there are no members on Zoom with their hands raised for comments or testimony. And there appears to be no members in our audience for comments or testimony.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, with that, we can go ahead and go to closing statements. Ms. Roberts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The district appreciates the discussion that today, and the district appreciates the board's patience with adding potential additional conditions. The district thinks those would strengthen this order for abatement, and certainly appreciates the respondents' willingness to agree to them that this remain a stipulated order for abatement. The district agrees with the board's concerns that this is an ongoing issue at Chiquita Canyon landfill and does require a lot of effort and attention to focus and remediate. There are limitations, and I think that expresses the board's frustrations of a facility like this that is downstream of the actual root cause. And I think it is important in evaluating this order for abatement. We're in looking for good cause to adopt this order. We have to consider that not only is this a facility that is downstream, but it is a downstream facility that is essentially trying to solve the problem of symptoms. I agree that's not solving the root cause in a large sense by pulling gas from the landfill, but it is addressing the potential of symptoms of ensuring that those emissions are not coming out as surface emissions that are highly odorous, that are pre-combustion and potentially have toxics. That is an important role for this facility. This abatement order, as stipulated to, does impose significant and stringent requirements on monitoring and calculating their excess sulfur emissions. Thanks to the board's questioning and request, they also now have stringent conditions looking at how what might be impacts due to dispersion modeling, and a requirement that they continue to remain engaged in assessing how to potentially evaluate treatment options. We think as revised, I will note there are potentially other minor modifications to the order just to reflect that the hearing was not held on consent from the finding, but other than that, we think this order can be adopted as revised. That revision has been submitted to the board, and we think as revised, it should be adopted as stipulated. Thank you.
Would that be a different exhibit then?
It was submitted to the board, and I would request that I think it would be Exhibit 3. It was submitted by the district. I don't have hard copies. I can try and get to my office to get you hard copies.
No, it's okay. Oh, is she?
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Potash, did you want to make your comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ameresco produces renewable energy and reduces emissions by taking landfill gas from the Chiquita Canyon landfill and using it to generate electricity. Ameresco's facility provides enough power for 10,000 homes. We urge the hearing board to take into account that noncompliance is beyond Ameresco's control. Ameresco has taken steps to mitigate emissions as well as monitor emissions in the past, and via the stipulated order for abatement, it will agree to do so, going above and beyond what any other party has agreed to do with respect to dispersion modeling from combustion sources in the area. We respectfully request that the hearing board issue the order for abatement as stipulated by the parties. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could add one other thing, once the board has marked the exhibit, I would respectfully request the board to deliberate on setting a status hearing. The parties do stipulate in a new condition number 12 that it would be in July, but the specific date we would request the board to set.
Thank you. Okay. Did you want to see that document that Altrice is bringing out first before we start deliberation, or?
We can start deliberation
Okay.
if I'm okay to go. I can go first. I think I will make the motion. I can find good cause to grant the modified stipulated order abatement based on the additional conditions that were added. I think we heard that Ameresco has no control, but however, I do want to emphasize there is a responsibility because, regardless of, even though you have no control on the quality of the gas that's coming in, as a source, you have a responsibility to reduce emission to the maximum extent possible. So it doesn't absolve Ameresco of the responsibility. And I know so that's why, I was trying to get those conditions in so that you continue to look at, because this could be a long-term ongoing for years, and they are. My understanding, my belief is that this is not a new issue. DMS control. There has been identified in the past, and there've been studies and lab scale studies and scientists, professors in different institutions, and they've published papers. I've got AWMA, I belong to the association. I've seen some papers on that. So that's why I said I think you have a responsibility to investigate, keep investigating, keep identifying. Maybe there's some other way to reduce DMS to the extent possible, feasible, cost effectively. I mean, you can come back at the status hearing and say, okay, maybe you can provide data to show daily monitoring of it's not necessary. You can do it once weekly or something. That'll cut your cost. But I would, like to see something else that you have instituted to, to control or looked at and see, even if, like I think Mr. Baitong said that you already have. I think you some research project you submitted an application was rejected for whatever reason. So that research project, something going, even if it's not successful, at least it's showing the community as a source you're responsible for the emissions that your source is generating. You can't just say it's all Chiquita's fault, and so we're not taking any responsibility for that, and we'll continue to admit whatever we get submitted. So I think that's the main reason why I was trying to put that one condition. The reason for the modeling is, and I think Ms. Roberts brought it up quite appropriately, that Chiquita is already doing MBM monitoring and sampling. So that's why they didn't have to do spatial modeling. You are a source, and that you have a elevated source, a buoyant source that may affect other areas that we may not be aware of. Now, it may be the impact zones may be the same ones that are already under purview of Chiquita, so that then at least then we can be sure that's already been looked at, unless there's some other impact area that's not been identified by the modeling, and then the modeling gives you some idea where the concentration may be. Then you can, at least once you can go out and sample, and if nothing was detected, then that's the end of it. At least you have shown that you've taken proactive steps in the meantime to do something, so that's all I'm saying.
All right,
Mr. Ali?
ready to entertain a motion?
Well, we're still deliberating, so I wanted to add also, I can find good cause, but I also want to reiterate the fact that because this looks like it's going to be a long-term situation, I don't want to go down the road that the Porter Ranch and Gas Company went, that even though it was originally identified and recognized, it still increased. And the health effects to that community also increased. And hopefully what is being proposed is going to be helpful in not only monitoring, but also finding the root cause. I recognize that Amoresco may not be responsible in that sense. However, you're a contributing factor to be able to help them, meaning Chiquita, not only discover that root cause, but also to help mitigate it. So with that, even though I will be voting for good cause, I do add that caution in there. And I appreciate the fact that the district, you worked with the district to come up with language that is palatable. But I do add that caution. Any other comments or okay, so.
So I think we do need to deliberate on the date on in
Yes.
July. I don't know.
Can you look at the book, please, El Teresa, once you do that? Thank you.
And this is exhibit.
The district would submit, this is exhibit 3.
Thank you.
So do we need to deliberate on the date, or can we go ahead and?
Well, we need her to give us the date. She hasn't given us the date yet.
Okay, but we can entertain the motion. All right, I got you. All right. She has the the holy grail, the book of the Lamb. And just a little levity over there. This is a status hearing.
No,
Yes, the end of July preferably. Where we have something in July already on a Wednesday, I do believe.
Our hearing's the 31st, I showed.
Our appearance of 31st.
No, I think as Ms. Roberts indicated, after Chiquita comes back,
Chiquita is coming back in April.
April, okay, so.
Okay,
yeah.
so then we can do this in July, San Bernardino on the 18th.
what is San Bernardino's? Is it the fleet issue or which one is that?
I believe it is the fleet. Well, no, it's the,
Treatment plan.
Ah,
municipal water.
So let me ask you, why could we not move San Bernardino and take both of these on the 24th? It's a Wednesday. Take San Bernardino as well as the status update on the 24th.
we don't really know how long San Bernardino's is gonna last. It's a request for,
It says a status report and modification of the order for abatement.
I think.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
Huh?
I have fleet.
Oh, fleet, is it
Yeah.
fleet?
yeah, I had fleet also.
It's the
I-
city of San Bernardino Municipal Water Department.
Okay, so, but it's only a status
They
report.
had the fleet too.
So can we take both on the 24th?
I think so.
And then you have the next week is the 30th for, so. All right.
I just had a quick question for Ms. Roberts. I know you said there was some additional condition you had added from the last order. Can you highlight those? I mean, besides the two which, were to discuss condition, were there any other changes from the regular variance condition?
From the regular variance, sure, I can, there have been minor modifications to condition number 1. Which deals with the frequency of change out of the carbon media. I think especially the last sentence of condition number 1, that's new. It requires a change out at a minimum of every 240 operating days. The sub conditions are slightly modified to also direct additional change out as necessary based on testing. Condition number 2, I believe is new from the variance, and that is a monitoring and record keeping requirement on temperature. And then condition number 7 is also additional from the variance, and that is prioritizing essentially in their flow, some of their gas can be bypassed around the sulfur treatment. It is prioritizing gas through the treatment wherever possible. I believe those are all of the changes to substantively from the variance conditions.
I'm sorry, can you repeat number 7 again?
So number 7 is looking at Amoresco currently has a system such that the landfill gas that they receive from Chiquita Canyon, because it has already gone through sulfur treatment at Chiquita Canyon, some of it is bypassed around Amoresco's treatment. And this condition would require that to the extent that's feasible, they prioritize putting as much gas as possible through the treatment system.
Thank you.
All right. Madam Chair, yes, with July 24th. I'd like to entertain a motion.
I can make a motion.
I can do it.
Go ahead, please.
All right, let's rock and roll. Madam Chair, members of the hearing board, I'd like to entertain a motion in the matter of South Coast Air Quality Management District Petitioner Amoresco Chiquita Energy LLC, Facility ID number 140373, respondent. Case number 6143-4, and this case is pertaining to findings and decisions for a stipulated order for abatement, District Rules 431.1, 3002, C1203B. I move that we find good cause to grant an order of abatement as set forth in the proposed findings and conditions that also details each and every permit number as well as piece of equipment as detailed as illustrated within Exhibit 3, as well as encapsulates the other provisions as set forth in the stipulated order as agreed to by both sides.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none. Mr. Balagoplon, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Pearman?
Aye.
Dr. Abraham?
Aye.
Mr. Ali?
Aye.
And I also vote aye, so it's unanimous. We do find good cause for this, and hopefully our concerns and statements will be taken very seriously. And we wish you good luck in doing so. And thank you to the district for all of your extra hard work on this and trying to find a resolution and answering our questions. Thank you so much. Thank you, board members, for attending and for all of your questions and comments. With that, this is a closed matter, and unless there's anything else, Madam Clerk, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.